Not Derek Broom. Derek's visiting family in Georgia, and I'm going to teach today in 1 Corinthians chapter 10 is where we're going to be. We're going to try to find what we can from that would be beneficial for us today. And that's been the key that he's been working on all the way through. So let's start chapter 10, and the first thing I want us to notice is one of Paul's little tricks that he'll use in his writing, and in this case, it's the word A-L-L. Watch how many times in the opening verses that you see that word. Moreover, brethren, I do not want you to be unaware that all our fathers were under the cloud, all passed through the sea, all were baptized into Moses in the cloud and in the sea. All ate the same spiritual food, and all drank the same spiritual drink. For they drank of that spiritual rock that followed them, and that rock was Christ. Every one of them received the blessings. There was not a single Israelite that was not blessed. And I think we need to think about that in terms of ourselves. First, let's look at them and see what we're talking about. All were under the cloud. Now, why was that important? Because the cloud was the presence of God among them. In the daytime, it was a pillar of cloud. At night, it was a pillar of fire. But God was with them all the time. They were always under his blessing. Now, what about us? We're not under a cloud, of course. He doesn't represent himself that way anymore. But aren't we always under the blessing of God? Aren't we always benefited? You think about Ephesians chapter 1, it talks about all spiritual blessings are ours in Christ Jesus. We got blessings all the time. And I sometimes become concerned about me, and I'm not going to talk about you. You think about you. But I become concerned about me because I begin to think, well, boy, I need this and I need that. And wouldn't it be better to think, look, what kind of blessings do we have? We're in Christ. We have marvelous blessings in Christ, every one of us. And we need to remember those, just like these people should have remembered what they had as well. So they were all under the cloud, and all passed through the sea. And here we are again. Think about it. The Egyptian army now was visible to them, all those chariots, and they were coming down on them. And they knew Pharaoh could be very difficult to deal with. He'd already been difficult. He'd already given them a very, very tough time, forcing them to now provide their own straw and to keep making the same number of bricks they always did before. They knew what he could do. And here he is, and they could see he's coming to take us back. That's what the plan is, to take us back. But then God opened up the sea. Moses held out the rod, God opened up the sea, and the people walked through on dry ground. And that within itself is an astounding event, because we know for sure that there were well over 500,000 men. And this is fighting men. This is men aged 20 and up. And then you add to that the likely number of women. We don't know a number, but the likely number. And then the children, we're probably talking about in the neighborhood of 2 million people. And they walk through on dry ground. That is just almost beyond the imagination. But they all benefited that way. Nobody was left behind. Then verse 2, all were baptized into Moses in the cloud and in the sea. Now, think about the way it was. The cloud is over them. the sea's on the right and the sea's on the left. That is a baptism of sorts. That is, they're surrounded by water, aren't they? That's the idea. Totally immersed, submerged in water. In this case, the water in the cloud and the water of the two walls beside them. And the Apostle Paul, as he thinks about it, wants us to understand that all of them experienced that baptism, that deliverance that would come with that. And he goes on, and all ate the same spiritual food. Now, when you're talking about it in terms of the physical, you'd have to say, well, they ate the manna that came down from heaven. But its source was a spiritual source, wasn't it? God. God fed them. God took care of them. They complained, finally, even about the manna. They complained, and when they did, he provided food beyond that. Provided for them the birds that came down in the camp, and they were able to eat them. But God totally took care of them, so thus it was spiritual food. And then verse 4, and all drank the same spiritual drink. Now he goes on and explains that. For they drank of that spiritual rock that followed them, and that rock was Christ. Now, if you've ever wondered, when I've made the comment that I believe that the angel of the Lord in the Old Testament is Jesus, pre-incarnate, not the Jesus we would recognize as a little baby born and so forth, but instead the pre-incarnate Son of God was the angel of the Lord. He's the one that spoke to Moses out of the bush. He identified himself not just as the angel of the Lord, he identified himself as God, if you read the whole context and circle those words, draw lines, because one time he calls himself the angel of the Lord, one time he says he's God. Well, now we see that he's the one that's with them wherever they go. And they're able to drink of the spiritual drink. Now, drink of the rock? Don't you remember that Moses, was instructed to strike the rock? And water came out of the rock? Well, what's the source of the water? Here, the Apostle Paul says it's spiritual water. That is, it comes from God, from the Spirit. And so the key word in this section is all. And for us, I want to suggest that is something that we need to capitalize on in our minds. And we need to think every day how blessed we are, all of us. There's not a single Christian that is not blessed. I'd say, well, I've got some tough time. Yeah, that may be. I'm not going to argue with that. But we're still blessed, aren't we? We've got marvelous blessings in Christ, as we talked about in the book of Ephesians, chapter 1. All right. Well, then he goes on, and the next thing we want to observe about them is God was not pleased with most. Okay, use the word all. You saw that 5 times in 4 verses. He used the word all. But in verse 5, suddenly, he uses a different word. It's not all. Instead, it's most. But with most of them, God was not well pleased, for their bodies were scattered in the wilderness. All right. If we were to go, and we can briefly, to Numbers chapter 1, we will see that the children of Israel leaving the land of Egypt. Listen to what it says, Numbers chapter 1, and we're particularly going to look at verse 3, if I can ever get turned to that page. Numbers chapter 1, verse 3. And here's what he says in that place. From 20 years old and above, all who are able to go to war in Israel, you and Aaron, shall number them by their armies. All right, what I'm trying to establish here is, who did God count? Who do you have the people count? Well, everybody 20 years old and up, able to fight. We're talking about fighting men. Did they number the women? Not by any record I'm aware of. Did they number the children? No, not by any record that I'm aware of again. All right, now go on down, same chapter. Now we're going, or chapter 2. Look at verse 32, because they've been numbering the people now. And as they number the people, here's what we discover. These are the ones who were numbered of the children of Israel by their fathers' houses. All who were numbered according to their armies of the forces were 603,550. So how many came out of the land of Egypt? Fighting men, 603,550. All right, now, go back and look again. But with most of them, God was not well pleased. Okay, how many got the reward? 603,550 went out. How many got the reward? Look at the book of Deuteronomy. Now we're seeing the the sermons of Moses, or the speeches, whichever way you want to call it, as he is preparing to transition out of their leader, and Joshua is going to be the next leader. So here he is. Who's he talking to? Well, if you know anything about the story, you know. He's not talking to those 603,550 fighting men, because most of them, remember the word in verse 5? Their bodies were scattered. And if you want to look at it literally, it's like corpses scattered in the wilderness. I am a history nut of sorts. Have you ever looked at the pictures that they have of the consequences, the end of some of the battles in the Civil War? I mean, we're talking about bodies everywhere. When you're talking about Gettysburg and Shiloh, places like that. The imagery that Paul uses in verse 5 of chapter 10 of 1 Corinthians is that they were just like that. That their bodies were just strewn all over the wilderness as they marched through. All right, so how many of them entered? Look at starting in verse 29 of chapter 1, Deuteronomy. Then I said to you, do not be terrified or afraid of them. The Lord your God who goes before you, he will fight for you according to all that he did for you in Egypt before your eyes. And in the wilderness where you saw how the Lord your God carried you as a man carries his son in all the way that you went until you came to this place. Now watch verse 32. Yet, for all that, you did not believe the Lord your God, who went in the way before you to search out a place for you to pitch your tents, to show you the way you should go, in the fire by night and the cloud by day. And the Lord heard the sound of your words and was angry and took an oath, saying, surely not one of these men of this evil generation shall see that good land which I swore to give to your fathers, except Caleb, the son of Jephunneh. He shall see it, and to him and his children I'm giving the land on which he walked, because he wholly followed the Lord. The Lord was also angry with me for your sake, saying, even you shall not go in there. That's Moses. Joshua, the son of Nun, who stands before you, he shall go in there. Encourage him, for he shall cause Israel to inherit it. How many were blessed? Well, let's start. Yes. You're ahead of me. How many were blessed? The word all is used. Who are we talking about? 600. I'm sorry. I'm about over this, but you can't tell it when I start speaking. Okay, 603,550 fighting men. Now, how many made it to the promised land? Two. So you could say 603,548 died in the wilderness. Why did they die? God said, "You did not believe me." Now, wait a minute. What do you mean they didn't believe? See, we use the word believe. We've got to be careful about that word. Because when the religious world uses the word believe, they're talking about what? They're talking about a mental thing. Thank you. They're talking about a mental thing. That you intellectually accepted it, whatever it is. See, they're talking about believing Jesus, and they're going to talk about an intellectual acceptance. That's not what, did those people believe God in that sense? Did they know He existed? Well, I think they did. But how did they not believe Him? He said, "Go in and take the land. I'm going to give it to you." And what did they say? The 10 spies said, "We can't do it." And because of that, the people did not do what God said. You see, belief is active. It was active in the Old Testament. It's active right now. Is that a message for us? Is there something there we could learn? I believe there is. So we've got to learn from their mistakes and realize what happened. It's interesting to me, and we're going to look at these next few verses, but in a book by T.W. Brents, this is an old book called The Gospel Plan of Salvation, Brents made this simple statement on page 27. "We know not how the apostle could have given more conclusive proof that the number of the elect composing the church of God at Corinth was liable to be diminished by apostasy than is here given." And I'd have to agree with him. And the reason I agree with him is this. This is written for our example. This is written so we can learn. Well, what are we supposed to learn if you can't fall? They fell. See, all of them came out of the land of Egypt. How many entered the land of promise? 2. So no wonder it says with most of them, that's pretty good way to express it, isn't it? With most of them, he was not well pleased. So now let's pick up at verse 6, and we'll read these and discuss them briefly. Now, these things became our examples to the intent that we should not lust after evil things as they also lusted. And we're going to see a number of those. But please observe, they are examples for us. Why is the Old Testament there? What is the purpose of it? For us to learn. Look at the book of Romans briefly. Romans chapter 15. Romans chapter 15. This Apostle Paul, he's talking to a church he's not gotten to visit yet. Verse 4. For whatever things were written before were written for our learning, that we, through the patience and comfort of the Scriptures, might have hope. Hope, by the way, is expectation. It's confident expectation. I did not even worry about what the numbers were for last night's $1 billion plus lottery drawing. You know why? I didn't buy a single ticket. I had no expectation of winning, but I didn't have any expectation of losing either, because I didn't buy anything. See? But when God gives a promise, you got a confident expectation that it's going to happen. It's going to be exactly the way He says that it's going to be. It is deeply disturbing to me that there are churches within our brotherhood where the leaders in the church will tell a preacher, don't preach from the Old Testament. That ain't got anything to do with us. Well, that's not what Paul said. That's not what he said in 1 Corinthians. It's not what he said in Romans. In both these cases, he said, these are for our example. What does he mean by that? Our example. Well, how does God deal with men? See, I can't, in reference to the church, I can't really say very much about it, can I? Well, I can talk about the blessings, but what if I'm disobedient? There are very few examples. You can talk one about Simon Sorcerer, Acts chapter 8, and you can talk about Ananias and Sapphira in Acts chapter 5. That's it. That's pretty much all I know. But now if I go back to the Old Testament, I see what God thought about it. You don't do what God says, what's he going to do? He's going to cut you off. That's what he's going to do. And that's what Paul is letting us know here. It's something we really, really need to see. All right, so watch verse 7. Now he begins to talk about the lust. See, lust is just desire out of control. That's all it is. Is desire wrong? Everybody nod your head this way. Desire is not wrong. I desire food. Do you? Yeah, every now and then. I desire water or something to drink. Don't you? Is it wrong? No. Nothing wrong with that. Not a thing in the world wrong with it. When does it become wrong? Well, desire out of control. Might happen on Thanksgiving Day. Might happen on Christmas Day. I don't know. Can't say. I'm not going to speak for you. I'm going to let all of us think about it ourselves, a little bit. But it's when we let that desire get out of control, it takes over. And that's what these people did. Now watch, verse 7. Do not become idolaters as some of them. As it is written, the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. It is interesting that literally translated, this is a present middle imperative. An imperative is a command, okay? And a present middle, what's that to? It's ongoing. So what he's literally saying is, do not continue being idolaters as they were. Continue being. All right, anybody in here know of, is there any idolatry that goes on in the United States today? A bunch. Okay, give me an example, Tim, just one. Sports. Sports has become, listen, I don't know how you are. My history, and I'm not talking about my personal bad experience, but my history with what gambling can do to destroy a Christian goes all the way back to Mobile, Alabama. I know a guy that was making, at that time, and in those days, this would have been a lot of money. Today, maybe not so much. In those days, this guy was making over $100,000 a year doing the job he was doing. And his family was about to have to move out of his house. Why? Because he got wrapped up in sports gambling. To me, it is a crying shame that it's gotten to where now you can't turn on and listen to a program without hearing an ad for some of these gambling things. And they'll have you gamble on everything. Is the next pitch going to be a strike or a ball? You can bet on that. I've never done it, but you can. Is this guy going to score one touchdown in the ball game? You can bet on that. Is he going to get this many yards? You can bet on that. Where it's taking us down a rat hole is what it's doing. And it will destroy you. Don't go into it. I've seen it. It destroyed a family in Mobile. It's that far back in my history. And I've seen it ever since, everywhere I've ever been. You can see it. Go stand in the convenience store sometime and watch mamas with little children that are obviously hungry, and they're buying pieces of cardboard, and after they get through scratching something off, they tear it up and throw it away. Why? Wasn't worth anything. Piece of cardboard. Can your children eat cardboard? Well, maybe. Can they live on it? I doubt it. I doubt it. Look out. We've got idols. One of them sports. Now, look, I love sports. And I'm going to tell you, my greatest dream right now is that Ole Miss wins the national championship so that a certain coach learns he should have stayed home. That's my opinion. You can take it for what it's worth, okay? I'm not good on disloyalty. It bugs me, okay. Idolatry, we got it. Yeah, what about money? Is money an idol? Oh, yeah. What about technology? I know people they got to always have the latest, greatest, every time. I keep my cell phones quite a while. They start getting flaky before I get rid of them, generally speaking. Okay. We have idols. They don't necessarily sit up in a special place and us bow down to them, but we just well to, because the way we act. Okay, so they are a warning to us. What else? By the way, covetousness is called idolatry in at least two places. Jesus warns against it in Luke 12, and Paul warns against it in Colossians chapter 3. All right, let's go ahead to the next verse, 8. Nor let us commit sexual immorality, as some of them did, and in one day 23,000 fell. All right, that story is found in Numbers chapter 25, but is immorality a problem today? Yeah. If you look at Romans chapter 1, it describes, starting in about verse 18, it describes a downward spiral into sin. I want you to think about what you see sometimes in the reporting on television and newspaper and so forth. Or is there in this country a downward spiral into sin? I think it's evident. I think you've seen it as well as I have. They display it in parades. They display it. It's everywhere. Really. You can't watch any kind of television program anymore without people jumping in bed with one another just at the drop of a hat. There's no loyalty, no faithfulness anymore. Look out. It'll kill you. It'll destroy you spiritually. It did them. All right, go ahead. Verse 9, he continues. Nor let us tempt Christ, as some of them also tempted and were destroyed by the serpents. How did they tempt Christ? They failed to trust God. That's how they did it. And they were destroyed by serpents as a result. That story is in Numbers 21. What about this? Verse 10, nor complain, as some of them also complained and were destroyed by the destroyer. All right, complaints. They murmured against God. That's from Numbers 14, 6 through 9, also verse 27 to 29, and Numbers 16, 41 to 49. Numbers 14 is the story of Korah's rebellion. And Korah didn't like that Moses was in charge, that God used Moses to lead. He didn't like that. And so he basically said, who made you boss? And he wanted to be boss. Well, God took care of that, real quick. He made a special welcome for Korah. The whole earth opened up its mouth and just swallowed him and all the people with him. Well, then the odd thing is, of all things, some of the people complained against Moses because Korah and those with him were destroyed. And so guess what? God sent serpents in there and they got destroyed too. Same way. Same thing going on. What about us? We got to learn not to murmur. Complaining is a sin. Now, that's going to take some adjustment, isn't it? Too cold, too hot, too wet, too dry. I could keep going, couldn't I? You can make a big list just like I could. We are in a society that loves to not be happy. Complain about this, that, and everything. To be careful, because that's what caused these people to die, at least some of these people to die. We need to put away complaining. By the way, let's look quickly at Philippians chapter 2. That's where Paul deals with it and talking to the brethren at Philippi. Pick up there verse 16. No, excuse me. I went down too far. Philippians 2, pick up 14. Do all things without complaining and disputing, that you may become blameless and harmless, children of God, without fault, in the midst of a crooked and perverse generation, among whom you shine as lights in the world, holding fast the word of life, so that I may rejoice in the day of Christ, that I have not run in vain or labored in vain. Don't complain. Don't complain. Instead, what? Shine like a light. Let me tell you what. If you don't complain, you will shine like a light. Because everybody else around you is going to be complaining about something. If you're not a complainer, people will take notice, and you might get to talk about God because of it to them. All right. Now, verse 11. Now all these things happened to them as examples, and they were written for our admonition, upon whom the ends of the ages have come. Why do you think I spent so much time in this class talking about they had the problem we do? We got the same problem they had. Why did I talk about all that? Because that's why God put it in the book. It's so that we would see, you go down this road, here's what's going to happen. And it's not good. Not one time was it good. So we need to read it, to understand it. So then he goes on, verse 12. Therefore let him who thinks he stands take heed lest he fall. Now, if you can't fall, why did Paul write that verse? Just think that through. Now, I will tell you, because I had a most interesting experience. I heard a preacher one day on the radio. Live, he was preaching to his congregation. We were already through with worship, and I was getting to listen to this guy as we drove toward the house. And he proceeded to explain that the two occasions in Hebrews 6, Hebrews 10, both of which warn about the dangers of falling. Both of them do. Okay. And you know what he said? He said those are just hypotheticals. Paul knew they couldn't happen. Say what? You don't need to tell me what might happen to my airplane. I don't own one. Okay? Ain't nothing going to happen to my airplane. Okay? Why would you write about something that could not happen? Take heed if you think you stand, lest you fall. They did. We can too. Verse 13. Now here's the solution. No temptation has overtaken you except such as is common to man. But God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you're able, but will with the temptation also make a way of escape that you may be able to bear it. I know New King James is worded different than my memory work, which is Old King James. Okay, but what's the point? Is temptation going to come? If I ask for and I'm not going to do that, but if I ask for a show of hands, everybody that's never been tempted, raise your hand. I don't think a hand would go up. We're all tempted at some time or another. Okay, does God give a way out? And the answer to that is yes. And now you might say, well, you can't prove that. All those people, oh, wait a minute. What about Joshua and Caleb? Did they find the way out? Yeah, they just trusted God. They found the way out. We need to see the same way. All right, continue. Verse 14. Therefore, my beloved, flee from idolatry. It's interesting, 4 times in this chapter he uses the word idol or idolatry. 4 times. So that is a major issue in the eyes of Paul. And it was, of course, in Corinth, because they had idols there, but as we've already demonstrated, we do too. I speak as to wise men, judge for yourselves what I say. The cup of blessing which we bless, is it not the communion of the blood of Christ? By the way, communion there could be translated fellowship or sharing. Now, when we partake of the Lord's Supper later today, will every Christian have the opportunity to partake? You nod your head this way. Every Christian will have the opportunity. You may not choose to do so. I don't know why you do that, but every Christian will have the opportunity. It's something we share in. And then he goes on, the bread which we break, is it not the communion of the body of Christ? For we, though many, are one bread and one body, for we all partake of that one bread. Boy, how important is it for us to see we're one people. We're one family. Don't ever forget it. We can help each other. We can all work together. If they'd have done it, they might have done better. If they'd listened to Joshua and Caleb, we know they'd have done better. All right, go ahead. Observe Israel after the flesh. Are not those who eat of the sacrifices partakers of the altar? What am I saying then? That an idol is anything? Or what is offered to idols is anything? Rather, that the things which the Gentiles sacrifice, they sacrifice to demons and not to God. And I do not want you to have fellowship with demons. You cannot drink the cup of the Lord and the cup of demons. You cannot partake of the Lord's table and of the table of demons. Or do we provoke the Lord to jealousy? Are we stronger than He? You know what He's saying? Be faithful to the Lord. That man that goes out and flirts with all the women while his wife's around, he's provoking her to jealousy. What Paul is warning is you don't want to provoke God to jealousy. He doesn't respond well to that. And again, think back to those Israelites. How'd he do with them? Not well. Not well at all. Now, he goes on. All things are lawful for me, but not all things are helpful. All things are lawful for me, but not all things edify. All right. Everything not against God's law is okay for me to do. That's what he just said. Now, we're not going to try to get into all of those today, but that's what he said. So how should I determine what I'm going to do and what I'm not going to do? Based on what edifies. Now, we'd use a different word. How about this? Builds up. My constant concern needs to be about what builds up the brethren. What will strengthen the church? That is the number one concern. So he goes on. Let no one seek his own, but each one the other's well-being. First thought, how will this affect my brother? Can I encourage my brother with this? Will he be made stronger with this? Will my sister be made better with this? That's Paul's question. Eat whatever's sold in the meat market, asking no questions for conscience sake. Okay, for the earth is the Lord's and all its fullness. Now, briefly, we've got to think about Corinth. Corinth had meat markets just like we do. We might call it a butcher shop, or you might just get yours at the local grocery store, and that's fine. They've got butchers there, or else they import the meat already butchered. We're not going into that. I don't understand all that anyway. But their meat, much of their meat in the butcher shop had been offered to idols. That is, a part of that animal was offered to the idol. So Paul says, when you go in the butcher shop, just buy the meat, don't ask questions. That's what he said. Okay, but watch. He's going to give an example where that may not be the case. So, if any of those who do not believe invite you to dinner, and you desire to go, eat whatever is set before you, asking no question for conscience sake. But if anyone says to you, this was offered to idols, do not eat it, for the sake of the one who told you, and for conscience sake, for the earth is the Lord's and all its fullness. Conscience, I say, not your own, but that of the other. For why is my liberty judged by another man's conscience? But if I partake with thanks, why am I evil spoken of? For the food over which I gave thanks. Therefore, whether you eat or drink, whatever you do, do all to the glory of God. Give no offense, either the Jews or the Greeks or the church of God. All right, here's what the situation is. He gets invited to go to supper. It's a big supper. A lot of people are going to be there, apparently. And this person invites you is an unbeliever. They're not a Christian. Okay, he says, go. And if they put a platter of roast beef down in front of you, eat it. Don't ask any questions. Just eat it. Why? Because the whole world belongs to God. It's okay. Just be thankful for what you have and eat it. It's fine. But what happens if in the same group of people that got invited, here's a brother or a sister, and they lean over to you and say, that meat is offered to idols. Now what you going to do? Don't eat it. Why? Is it because you don't know that that food came from God? No. It's because your brother or your sister still has a little bit of trouble with the idol. And if you eat it, then they're going to be emboldened to eat it. And if they eat it, it'll be sin. Why? Because they think that when they eat it, they're honoring the idol, a false god. Can't do that. And so I'm going to avoid the meat, not because of me, but because of them. That's what Paul just said. All right, think about that in terms of our life right here. Be careful what you do. If a brother or sister says, and I don't know what they're going to say, but when they say, you better stop and think, wait a minute, is this going to hurt them? If I do this, it's going to hurt them? That's what Paul's saying. All right, last verse. Just as I also please all men in all things, not seeking my own profit, but the profit of many, that they may be saved. Now then he goes in chapter 11, verse 1, imitate me, just as I also imitate Christ. Why did Jesus die on the cross? To save men. So he sacrificed. Did he want to die? Well, if you read Matthew 26, you know the answer to that. No, he didn't want to go through that. But why did he die? Because he wanted to save me. He wanted to save you. Why should I give up something that I know I have the freedom to do? Because it might hurt my brother. That's what this chapter is all about. Thank you. I give you back a minute and a half.